3 years in a row, baby. Not done it since the 80s. Not in my lifetime. Woo, what a weekend. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory, and I'm joined by my very good friend, Adam. Adam, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, really good, thank you. And it was great to see the demise of Arsenal as it was kind of labelled. But I mean, I think the kind of topic that kind of topped it, so to speak, was seeing that Jay-Z is being linked with Everton. And Everton, TikTok and Twitter at its best said he's not only got 99 problems, but he's got 100 problems now. But yeah, more importantly, Rory, I bet you're on cloud nine after that result on Sunday.
What a weekend. It started with the Alex winning 1-0 away to Accrington Stanley, which honestly felt like a massive win in itself. I then guested on the Crew Alexandra podcast for the first time. It was a delight. So thank you, boys, for having me on the Railwaymen podcast, if you are that way inclined. Yeah, it was fantastic to discuss all things that. It was nice because it was Sunday and it took my mind off the derby that was coming on afterwards.
Right.
And then obviously there was a 1-0 win for Arsenal. And there was so much about that game that pleased me. We're going to get into it, I'm sure. Elsewhere, there was massive results this weekend. Nottingham Forest getting a huge win at Liverpool, the first time since 1969. I think it was 50 years since they've won in that stadium. Everton, they did it again. They went 2-0 up, and the whole world went, stick your mortgage on Aston Villa winning this. I was desperately trying to set up my betting app in time, and I was like, I've just done it. But Everton did it again. Aston Villa got the win. And elsewhere, United with a 3-0 win. Chelsea scraping past Bournemouth. But before we get into all that, let's take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk all things North London derby. And here we are. Arsenal 1, Tottenham Hotspur 0, Arsenal 1, North London derby. What a game, what a performance. Before I go off, Adam, your impressions of this game, because obviously I can't judge it as, well, anything beyond Arsenal. For a neutral, how was that game? Because I can't imagine it was the most exciting, but maybe intriguing.
No. Yeah, it wasn't a classic. What I would say, it was definitely maybe exploited by the fact that Ange played into Mikel Arteta's hands. And I think what summarized it best was I had a Arsenal friend via my son's football group message me, because he's a season ticket holder at Spurs, believe it or not, Rory. And he messaged me going, yeah, Ange has left a big hole in the middle of the park. This should be interesting. And inevitably, it did come to fruition. It basically was how we kind of maybe anticipated that the pressure was on Spurs. But what was, I suppose, more alarming is that they haven't really addressed a lot of the deficiencies from last season. It still seems to be prevailing into this season. And maybe there's a bit too much reliance on these players to pull them out. And I know Ange alluded to this gap prior to this kind of game being played, and kind of indicating that there is a gap in terms of quality between the two sides. But I think there is a fundamental difference anyway in terms of that the supporters want a bit more grit and determination in these games, and we didn't see that necessarily. I think, if anything, Arsenal played cool hands. They made sure they didn't kind of get too rifled up in sense of getting too animated. I think they played it really well. The likes of Jurrien Timber to come into this match and play the game that he did was insane. But I think the credit has to go to Gabriel as well as Saliba for that performance. Was incredible. Like, I think you know about their strengths and their capabilities, but that game really did test them, because that was their kind of performance on the line there, and they showed the Spurs defense how it's to be done. They showed what the levels were required, and they showed their class above it. And the fact that they'd exploited it from a set piece as well, typically something of a really weak piece for Spurs' point of view. I mean, yeah, it was a beautiful piece of work from an Arsenal perspective. But I think, a lot of question marks about the mentality of the Spurs players, I think, in this match, because of the way they approached it.
Well, I think I'm going to talk about Spurs before I talk about Arsenal, because I think you raised an interesting point there. Obviously, before the game, we've got no Rice, we've got no Erdogan, we've got no Mikel Merino, we've got no Calafiori, we've got no Zinchenko, we've got like the squad is pretty depleted, right? Look at the bench, and Spurs fans were like, "You've only got one injury." Look at our bench and tell us we've only got one injury. There's like 5 teenagers I've never heard of, right? And I thought this midfield battle with Jorginho and Partey, I was bricking it, because Partey's been terrible off the ball. He's not the player he was 5 years ago. And Jorginho hasn't played 90 minutes since, I think, May or March. Like, he was very much a bit part player towards the end of the season. He's obviously getting on. And I thought, if there's a midfield with any sort of legs, we're done for. And then I saw the lineup and I thought it was Bentancur, Maddison, and then it was Kulusevski as the third midfielder, right? Now, obviously, Kulusevski is much more of a winger, kind of more traditional, right? So I thought, my God, Bentancur has got a lot of work to do in that midfield. Like, if he is the only one who's doing defensive work, then we might have a chance here. And I feel like he just left that area of the field completely open for us. I think it was really quite naive from Ange. Now, obviously, we know he doesn't adapt how he plays. He's got his idea, his plan B is to do plan A better, all that kind of stuff. But I thought that was really just a gaping mistake there. That even playing kind of a Saar maybe in midfield would have been a little bit better than I know Kulusevski was actually one of Spurs' better players on the day, but I think maybe dropping Johnson, playing Kulusevski further up, having Saar in that midfield would have provided a bit more solidity.
Sure.
Because even though Arsenal barely left their own half for much of the game, when we did break, there was no resistance in midfield, and we were just able to break through fairly easily. So I think from what I've heard, there's a lot of kind of impatience towards Ange now. And I found his comments quite fascinating that so last season he said, when he was quizzed about set pieces, "I don't care about them. It doesn't bother me," right? He then, after this game, was annoyed about the narrative about set pieces. Like, mate, you set the narrative last year when you made those comments, right? Like, this is your creation. So I think he's starting to lose a bit of that charm that he had with the media, and we're starting to maybe see what he's a bit more naturally like. And then the comments about, "I don't sometimes win in my second year, I always win something in my second year," is just unnecessarily piling pressure on yourself. And I think maybe we're seeing him wobble a little bit, and the decisions he made in this game were not up to scratch. But I also think with that Spurs team, I don't know why they don't shoot. I just don't know why they don't. Like, it was all summed up for me by that, when my heart dropped when Solanke was one-on-one and when we passed the ball across the defense. But that split second, he hesitates on the ball, and then Saliba's there. You don't get that time with Saliba around. You don't get that split second. Do you feel like there's a bit of, with Spurs at the moment, there's a bit of a like passing the responsibility in an attacking sense, right? Someone else, like, "Oh, he'll score. It just felt like none of them were really willing to take a shot. Like, Son was good first half, disappeared second half. Like, why do you think that clinicalness isn't there? Is it just as simple as they haven't got Harry Kane anymore?
I think there's an element of, they've always been used to a Harry Kane-like figure when you kind of reminisce about the old guard. But I think you've got to kind of go beyond that and say, look, this is now Ange's style. These are his players, right? And I think they create a lot in the sense of that they're very strong on possession. They're very quick and counter-attacking style. But like you say, that they have no end products. And I think that's the frustrating thing about how this match highlighted that kind of ability that was lacking from Spurs. Another interesting point is, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this as well, is that whilst they are building this team to compete with your top fours and the equivalents, really, the types of players that are brought in are very much maybe players that are progressing, maybe not the end product, so to speak. Whereas for Spurs to be really competing with your likes of your Arsenals and maybe Man Cities, etc., they need players that are going to have that to their kind of abilities in terms of their end products. They need to be players that can be a bit more assured, that you can rely upon them. I feel that maybe that is true of Spurs, that they haven't got necessarily those type of players in their squad yet. They haven't got quite the depth there. There's no doubt that potentially those players could be there in the future. They could be even better. But right now, I think that is still a project. It still feels like they haven't got the players yet. Solanke, there's a lot of pressure on him to deliver given the price tag and the fact that, you know, if you look at his history, he's only really had a good few seasons with Bournemouth. With the greatest respect to him, you need to be able to take those chances like you alluded to. And I think, unfortunately, they haven't got that style of caliber. And I do question maybe that's over-reliance on Ange being persistent with this style of football. You know, it's all about playing this aesthetically, really counter-attacking but quick style of football. But they haven't necessarily got the same kind of finishers that can take the chances. If you think about the midfield contribution as well as the kind of upfront position, they haven't got anyone beyond the likes of, say, a Son. Like, I'll be brutally honest, I don't know Kulusevski's total for this season, let alone last season, but I don't think it even goes into double figures. So whereas if you compare that to the likes of a Man City or Arsenal, you've got players that contribute goals. They also do the assists quite well. I just don't think they've got that. And on top of that, to compound it, you've got this kind of set piece scenario as well. Now, I don't want to dwell on that too much because it's been hounded in the press about that being a focal point. But I think it is getting to a point where if you can't do the basics right, this team cannot evolve. They cannot push on. If you can't defend, fine, but then try and make sure you don't play too much to the weaknesses, and that is by playing zonal marking. What were they thinking? And although they weren't in the same position as they were in the last North London derby at Tottenham Stadium, where they were already 2-3 down by half time, this is still the fundamentals that are still being replicated and still not being like adapted and not working on it. And if Vicario is really weak at claiming crosses, then ensure that he's covered. You know, make sure you've got the key men marking the right players. You've got the likes of Maddison and Kulusevski marking the likes of Gabriel. On what world does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense. And I'm afraid like Ange just needs to look at maybe ripping up the book and going back to basics. Get rid of zonal marking from set pieces, and then they might be able to do something. But I also think maybe the system just doesn't suit the players. I don't know what your thoughts are on that one.
I think the whole set pieces thing, we're going to get to it from an Arsenal point of view as well. But I think it's a willful, like, it's willfully not addressing the issue now. Because, like you said, last year we scored 2 corners against them. They scored 1 for us, right? But like 2 set pieces last year, the exact same scenario this year. I think like you have to willfully be like, it's kind of pig-headed at this point. So I think there is an issue there that needs looking at. That being said, Arsenal are the best team in the league at set pieces, right? So you're coming up against the best team in the league. Like, even if you have been training it, you might concede one, right? What I think is unforgivable actually isn't really systematic with that goal. I think Romero is my favourite Tottenham player. He keeps scoring for us. He keeps gifting us goals. But that defending is absolutely criminal. I do not know what he was doing. Like,
no,
he's looking at the player up until the point where he needs to look at the player, and then he turns his back to him and just walks away. And I think, look, whoever tried to say that was a foul, I'll just take you back to St. James's Park last year when Joe Linton climbed on the back of Gabriel and scored after the ball had gone out. Do you remember that one? And Gabriel was told, you need to be stronger there, right? If that's not a foul and that's a goal, then on no earth is that a foul, right? Gabriel just gives him a shove. Romero is weak. He switches off. He's literally doing the opposite of his job. And I think that something like that, Ange can drill until he is blue in the face with a player like that. But if you're going to have those lapses in concentration, you cannot mitigate for that. That is something that you just be like, I did not tell you to forget all the basics of defending. Right. So I think as much as there is a systematic thing there, what Romero did is genuinely unforgivable. I think if one of our defenders did that, I would be raging. And I think the fact that Romero does this basically every big game I see, he has a moment where he's a liability. I think that's the reason why no one else has gone for him. Right. I think he's just a bit of a liability. But for us, he's a fantastic player for us. So I'll take it. So I think there are issues with Tottenham. Clearly, I think Ange. The issue is he's not going to change. We know he's not going to change. No. And I think he's given himself a very short rope to kind of hang himself with, if you know what I mean. He's not going to get much leeway. Vicario, I think, is a really interesting one because obviously we take a look at Italian football on this pod as well. Fantastic shot stopper. Genuinely thought he could push Donnarumma for the number 1 shirt at one point. This issue he has with dominating his box now and with his strength. I think Gary Neville went a bit over the top on the commentary and was a bit like, all right, Gary, we get it. You've spotted something. You can shut up now, right? And I feel like every time Vicario plays, he kind of plays that same note, Gary, just over and over again. But this is becoming a trend now. It is an issue. But then again, it's for the team there to protect him. His own players get in the way and stop him from being able to come for that cross, even if he did want to. Like, it's just all the complete mess, terrible defending. But I think Spurs just completely, at no point, beyond the nerves of it being a derby and me being scared of losing, there was no point where I was like, they're going to score here. Maybe the first 10, 15 minutes when Raya made a few saves. Solanke was really unlucky with that header. At that point, I thought, okay, we need to wake up a bit. But then the longer the game went on, I was like, we'll be fine. Like, I think it'll be all right. And the second we scored, I was like, okay, yeah, we'll take this. And I think for the Spurs fans, it must just be really disheartening to see such pedestrian kind of football there because it was all just played in front of Arsenal and they made it super easy for us. It was nice for James Maddison to take a day off. That was very generous of him. But let's talk about Arsenal because I really enjoyed it. What I love about Arteta, one of the many things I love about Arteta, a lot of people just call him a Pep disciple, right? Like, oh, he's just copying Pep. He's just copying Pep. No. He has taken as much from David Moyes as he has from Arsene Wenger, as he has from Pep Guardiola. There is no part of the game that Arteta doesn't see as important. There is no style of football that he is not willing to do if it means that he gets a win. All he cares about is winning. And what I really enjoyed about that performance was that we just terrorized flat back 11 and just went, you've got to break us down. We know that we can get one against you, but we also know you won't score against us. And I just thought it was some of the best defending I've seen from this Arsenal team in the time he's been. It's in the time I've been watching Arsenal. It's some of the best defending, if not the best defending I've seen, right? I think even players like, before we get onto Gabriel, who is just, I'm glad he's finally getting his flowers, but players like, and I'm glad that Gary Neville pointed it out, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, but when he was talking about the defensive shift that Saka put in, and he was like, Saka is the best defensive winger in the league. Like, he is the best at doing it. I think Martinelli, look, he's having issues with his end product this season, but when he went off, we noticed on the left, and when Sterling came on, we lost a bit of protection there. Like, what did you make of, like, just even Havertz, just the graft? I don't get how Chelsea fans hated him. I don't know how you can hate him. He just works and does everything. Like, how did you see that team defensive? I thought it was so cohesive.
When you were talking about like where Arteta's kind of influences were from, what I kind of evoked was Walter Smith with Rangers. In those kind of derby days in, the likes of Ibrox or whether it be Celtic Park, Rangers did have those kind of performances where it was against the wall kind of stuff. And there was probably a lot of that playing a part as well. And, when you think about how Arsenal approach it, and you're right to allude to kind of that defensive work, which was not just that back line, but it was also the whole team. One of the kind of clips that I remember seeing was Raheem Sterling, as much as he hasn't been maybe adapted to maybe the way Arsenal play things, he knew his role because he's done it before with Arteta and he's done it at Man City. So he knew quite firmly what he had to do. I'm with you with Kai Havertz as well, in terms of like Chelsea fans. I think they expected him to be goal scoring lots of goals and therefore being more clinical in front of goal. But like you say, it's the other bits that he does really well, the constant pressurizing, the press, the tempo that he adds to his game. I think that really alleviates a lot of the pressure from a defensive point of view. And like you say, Saka, I think he's definitely up there with one of the best in terms of what he can do. I think it helps that he was initially when he came through the system, he was in that defensive kind of position, wasn't he? He was a left back initially before he kind of progressed. And those are the types of players that get the overall kind of overarching kind of goal, and they understand the space as well. They understand where players are going to exploit it. And I think that experience probably helps him massively in terms of how to deal in those sort of scenarios. So it was a massive win from an Arsenal perspective, because you got people and players that are adapted to different kind of roles in that respect. And that was such a massive win in that respect. I know it's traditional Arsenal 1-0 to the Arsenal, but it was far more than just that. It was the way that they played about it. And I still allude to the fact that Spurs played into hands by the formation, by the personnel. I think that massively played a part, but you've got to give credit, because Spurs did have chances. They did apply pressure, but just Arsenal absorbed it. They knew what to do in that scenario. And I think that typifies a team when you're on, as you alluded to, on your bare kind of minimum numbers, where, you still got the quality and depth, those type of players that you fear that might not stand up and be counted, they actually did. They did their duties. And I think that's phenomenal from a point of view of Arsenal, because I think that instills a lot of confidence going into the midweek game. But more importantly, now that you've got Declan Rice coming back into the fold, that gives you a lot more kind of reassurance about potentially how you go about it. Now, even if you get a draw, that is still probably seen as a positive on the grand scheme of things. But let's see how this pans out. Certainly, I think midweek will play or dictate how this game will be played as well. Same for Man City as well in this respect, because that's a massive game. Massive game.
It's a big week ahead. Atalanta away and City away. Thank you, UEFA, for putting our game on a Thursday night before the fucking Sunday. But fine. It's a big week. It's a big week. But I think there's a word you said there, and I think it's right. It's like the belief that the players, like this team now, believe that without Rice and without the captain Ødegaard, they can go out and get big results. And I think because for players like Jorginho and Partey, that everyone was staring at that midfield going, what is going to happen here? And I think Jorginho, you could see him at the end. He was dead on his feet. He could barely move. He was cramping up. But the last 5 minutes, he got like a fifth wind and he just started running again. And he started covering ground. And and you just saw that, like, for them now, they can all look around and be like, look, all of us here are good enough to be able to get this over the line and get it done. I just think for the belief of the team, it's absolutely massive. Before we move on, I promise we're not going to do much more. I just need to talk about two more players. Gabriel, he joined us. He was the first player to join in Arteta's project, right? He came when the project was only a dream, right? It was just beginning. And he saw the project. We convinced him. He stayed. He's been 99.9% of the time, he's been absolutely fantastic. His first year, he was a bit ropey, but he's an absolute animal. And I think Saliba gets all the credit because he's much silkier, he's much, more easy on the eye. But I think as an out-and-out defender and as a leader on that field, Gabriel is just unbelievable. No defender scored more goals than him since he's joined the league. That's 15 crazy for him now. He's just an absolute threat. He loves it. And when Spurs just started piling balls into the box towards the end of the game,
just gobbled it.
He was just like, yeah, okay, I can do this all day. I love this shit. And he was just heading it away, clearing it away. Just he eats that up. And I think that's why the Arsenal team was just like, yeah, fine. If you're going to just throw long balls, we can do that all day. So I think he was fantastic. And Yuri and Timber.
What a performance.
Like, I am absolutely devastated we didn't have him last year now. I think he would have made such a big difference last year. He does everything very, very well. His defensive solidity is incredible. His passing, his time on the ball, his fight, like the fact he had Vicario around the neck and was like, let's just fucking go. Like, there was a thing on Arsenal Twitter, every game he posts like a Bible verse before the game because he's like super religious. Right? And then there was that picture, and I was like, this guy will like quote Bible verses while he's kicking your teeth out. Like, this guy is just like, he's absolute machine. He gets it straight away. He was screaming at the fans. And I think for a player like Son, like going up against him, Like there was Brennan Johnson even. There was the first half Johnson was getting a little bit out of him, but then very quickly it was just shut down. And he was like, no, I know how to do this now. I can deal with it. And I think that's the first time that's the first start for Arsenal. It's the first time he's completed 90 minutes. So I think it's just huge. Like these performances that the players dug out, like him and Jorginho are the ones where I'm just like, they dug out these 90 minutes. Like for him to be in this form coming back from an ACL is just genuinely mind-blowing.
It's incredible.
And the last thing, Ethan Nwaneri came off the bench. I love that Arteta turned to him. I love that he was like, no, come on, you've got your minute. And him, Jesus, and Sterling came on, and he was the one who didn't give the ball away or give away any stupid fouls. And I thought, this guy's 17, and he looked completely at home. There was a moment where he had the ball for about 45 seconds. He was just like switching, turning, then finally laid it off. I was like, this guy doesn't give a shit. He's super calm. Really, I think it was a bit of a risk there from Arteta to throw him on. But there was I think they pointed it out in the commentary as well, but Gabriel Jesus said to him, no, you stay up front. I'll do the defensive work. And it was like this senior player going, no, don't worry. I'll do the doggies. You just need to stay up there and be the outball. And I just think that also sums up the kind of spirit in the team as well. Like they're not just going to throw in a 17-year-old and be like, right, go on.
And expect him to,
You've got Son. He's yours. If you know what I mean. Like, so I think it was really just, delighted to see him. What an unbelievable win. And just, I love how we won it. It was incredible. So I think really perfect momentum for what it could be a pretty rough week. But it's a perfect start. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see which team takes the field against Atalanta and how much juggling we do. Because I think we do need to do a bit of juggling. But we can move on now. I think I'm done with the North London derby. Listeners, you'll be used to it by now. I think 23 minutes on it isn't that bad, actually. And we did Tottenham as well. What you're complaining about is fine. So let's move on and let's go to the next game. And next in our running order was... It happened again. Everton 2. Aston Villa 3. Everton 2. Adam. What are we going to do about Everton? What is happening?
I don't know. I gave them false hope, didn't I? I thought they could maybe surprise us, and they almost did. They almost gave us a surprise.
You had me there at the beginning.
First half 2-1, and you're thinking, blimey, Everton could get a result here against this Villa side that looks a bit shaken up, especially when Onana has been tackled to the ball and Dwight McNeil kind of weaves through and slots a ball past Martinez, and you're thinking, wow, this Everton side really looks up for it, and double the effort through Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and you're thinking, wow, this could be fascinating. And just before halftime, Ollie Watkins gets a goal. Second half, you're kind of thinking, right, this could be an interesting game still, because Lewin then runs in after being threaded. It was a great move as well, Rory.
It was a great pass. It was a
great passing move together. And when you look at the grand scheme of things, I think there was about 6 passes. That probably equates to about 10% of their passing on the second half, to be fair. But it was that move, and you're thinking, well, Calvert-Lewin, as much as he can miss it in the simplest term of like maybe shooting and it gets saved, he just has a lot of indecision in his mind when he's running through on goal. And one of the things that you do as a striker is you've got to be firm in your decision, and you go, right, I'm going to hit it this way, or I'm going to do this movement. But he does neither of those. And he completely gets done by Konsa, who does brilliantly to kind of make sure he ships the ball away from goal. But that gives the momentum to Villa. Unfortunately, that just gives the momentum to Villa. And from that moment onwards, they knew they had to get a grip of the game. And, look, credit to Emery, because he made a few changes there, one of them being John Duran, and boy, did we get treated to goal. But, I mean, prior to that, Ollie Watkins has numerous chances. At 2-2, he brings it back. And then you think, right, it goes down the other end. Dominic Calvert-Lewin could just slide in and get a third. It doesn't happen for him before we saw that beauty from John Duran. But I think there is a lot to be said about Sean Dyche now. There has to be some question marks in terms of that style of philosophy, that maybe the group of players are just not well fitted to his style of football. He's all about getting quick, decisive moves, but it doesn't feel like when they've got the ball, they know how to control it. it has to be decisive. It has to be direct, right? And it just doesn't suit that kind of style of play. You need players that are happy to absorb the pressure and then hit teams on the counter-attack. And I don't think that group of players are used to that, personally, Rory. I think they're a bit more diverse in the kind of style of football that they want to play. But I also I question the mentality as well of the players. I think
it's more. I think it's more a mentality issue, honestly. I think you look at players like McNeil and you look at players like, Calvert-Lewin. These are players that have played counter-attacking football in the past. They have played Harrison at Leeds, right? You can't tell me that guy isn't used to running under Bielsa, right? You can't tell me that guy isn't used to dynamic counterattacks, right? I think there is an issue here that is either like you can reel them out. Ilman Ndiaye is built for that, right? He's built for quick runs up front.
Mm-hmm.
So there's either an issue of the players are not listening, or Sean Dyche isn't getting his message across, right? Because there is a kind of mismatch here. There's a link missing, right? Clearly. But I think there's also the point of like, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? Like you can get them 2-0 up. At some point, they have to take responsibility and see the game out. And I thought even and I felt really bad for the Everton fans in the stands because they went mental when they went 2-0 up. And I went, there has to be one Everton fan stood there going, no, I'm not celebrating because I know what's going to happen. And I think everyone who was watching that game went, Villa are going to win this. Like there was not a doubt in my mind that they were going to win it. And then the second Calvert-Lewin missed that chance to make it 3-1. I was like, yeah, they're done. They are just going to absolutely fold it in now. So I think there is a mentality issue within that team that they're just not able to remain calm and just retain possession. Do the things that Burnley used to do when they were a goal up, when they were 2 goals up, right? Slow the game down. Keep hold of the ball. Win your free kicks. Get the ball up, like keep the ball in the opposition, the opposition half. They're just not able to do anything. They just drop deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. There's no calm heads in the back line. No. The Michael Keane ducking that header for one of the goals is criminal. Like
terrible.
I know Everton fans are like losing their mind to the fact he's still starting.
Yeah.
Yes, he's still starting because Braithwaite is injured, right? I think if Braithwaite is in the team, maybe this team changes a lot more sturdy, a bit more. But I think there was just no part of them that were like they even knew what they needed to do to see the game out because they didn't even attempt it. It was just, and Aston Villa, the second they got one, they were like, yeah, we'll be fine. We got 60 minutes here. Like these lot aren't going to hold out for 60 minutes. And you could see it on them. Like Villa weren't snapping at they weren't snatching at their chances. They weren't like panicking. They were just like, let's just keep going. And eventually we know what's going to happen. And they did. Obviously, the winner was absolutely
incredible.
Sublime and like really was an extra kick in the nuts for Everton fans. But
it was.
Like if you're going to lose, it might as well be a banger, I suppose. But like there was no kind of panic across that Villa performance at all. It was just like, we'll get this done. I think, but that being said, it's still also massive that they did come back and get it done because it has been a bit of a slow start to the season for them. I'm really happy for Watkins to get those 2 goals. Obviously didn't really have have any preseason, was away with England, of course, and it's just taken him a bit of time to catch up with his teammates and think he can get on the wavelength. But 2 goals for him. You could tell in the post-match he was gutted he didn't get a hat-trick. He was like the interview afterwards was talking and you could see him like really kind of beating himself up. And I was like, I love that you're like really annoyed about that hat trick, but don't beat yourself up too much. Like you've still got 2, you're still going like, come on, head up. Like this is your season starting now. So I thought really pleased for him. I thought McGinn was fantastic. Some really big, really good moments for him. Just, he ran through the Everton midfield at times like they literally weren't there. But one player I was a little bit concerned about, might be a bit of a heavy word, but Morgan Rogers was really, really good against Arsenal.
Yeah.
I thought he was trying a bit too hard in this game. I thought he wasn't doing the simple things. Everything was like a little flick or an extra turn or trying to beat that extra man. I think what he did so well against Arsenal was he just did everything like simple, effective, direct. I felt like he was just playing a little bit too much on the ball in this game. And I thought, let's just calm down a little bit and remember what it is you're good at and how you got those good performances. But that's just super nitpicking. It's just something I noticed and was like, I don't really like that. But for Villa, a big win. Who impressed you for them? I think Tielemans was also very, very good.
Yeah, I think so. I think generally, yeah, I think you've said the main key ones. Maybe Lucas Digne from a left wing perspective as well, being a constant menace. But I have to say also, I'm starting to appreciate Konsa a lot more in that central defense. I think he's matured a lot since he kind of, from the past few seasons anyway, that I've seen him. There's been a few mistakes that I've been kind of, I'm not too sure about him, but actually, when I saw him against Finland representing England, I thought, wow, he has become a bit more mature, a bit more better in terms of reading the game. And you could see, like, when I alluded to the fact that Calvert-Lewin had that chance 1-on-1 to make it 3-1, just that interception, that block was enough to deter Calvert-Lewin, I think, as well. So, look, I think his game is massively improved. But yeah, I think you've called out the key ones. But alluding to Everton just quickly, I mean, I don't think Dyche has a lot of options when it comes to that defensive element. I mean, do you think he might need to rethink who he plays? I mean, dare I say it, does he just go back to a traditional 4-4-2 formation just to shake things up?
Well, I think he's not going to leave from a back four. He's always going to have a back four. We know he's not going to change anything there. But I think he's just waiting for Braithwaite to come back. He's waiting for Braithwaite to come back and just be like, that's the linchpin of the defense, right? It's a lot of pressure on that lad when he comes in.
I know,
but like,
massive.
I think that is the issue, really, that Michael Keane isn't a Premier League.
And also Ashley Young at right back. I mean,
oh, Jesus, like how he's still starting games in 2024 as like your starting right back. You're coming up against wingers that will skin anyone, and it's not even a dig at Ashley Young. Like, time is time. There's nothing you can do about it. You're being told to start. You're going to start, right? But that is a huge issue as well. How they've not addressed that is genuinely
it's
worrying.
ridiculous.
But I think they're waiting for Braithwaite to come back. Sean Dyche isn't going to change what he does. I think we know what he does works. He just needs to get that across to the players. And I think they just need any win. They need a 1-0 scummy, horrible win that nobody enjoys, that you can just get and be like, right, okay, we're a football team.
Let's build on that now.
Let's just don't go 2-0 up ever again, Everton. Because if you do this 3 weeks in a row, I think the football world might lose its mind. But yeah, Everton fans, we're going to leave you there so you can pretend this never happened. And we're going to move on to our next game. I don't know how they found their way so far down the running order, but it's because I'm an Arsenal fan. Liverpool 0, Nottingham Forest 1. Their first win at Anfield for 50-odd years, like I said in the intro. Well, Arne Slot, it all kind of came unstuck there. I did see a United fan retweet the video of his tactical breakdown after the win against United and go, oh, is he going to do this for the Forest game now? Is he going to spend 2 minutes picking apart how Forest beat him? Which I did enjoy. But we'll talk about Liverpool. Let's give Forest their plaudits. Incredible performance from them. Hudson-Odoi with a banger. Really enjoy him as a player. And something that I think on the weekend that I saw Brennan Johnson play for Tottenham, I thought Forest have done incredible business getting 55 million for him. But incidentally, they also replaced him with Elanga and Hudson-Odoi at a combined cost of like 20 million, I think it was.
Yes.
Which Nottingham Forest get a lot of stick for their, let's buy 60 players, throw enough shit at the wall, one of them will be good.
And what a stick, yeah.
But that is an incredible piece of business. And both Elanga and Hudson-Odoi in this game really showed their quality. I think Forest, not to go over the top, but they might be good enough to avoid a relegation battle this year.
I think on the basis of that performance, you kind of certainly see Forest in a different light. I was sceptical about Forest for this season. I didn't think they had enough in terms of the reinforcement, the depth in particular. And don't forget they had that terrible injury to the midfielder Danilo, I think it was, where he obviously broke his leg. And you're fearing the very worst for them. But they got in James Ward-Prowse. And, being able to kind of have that kind of player with that capability, that really does strengthen your kind of stance in this league. And I think the way that Nuno Espirito Santo especially kind of approached it was, just almost a way of playing against Liverpool. This is the way you can break them down. And I think Liverpool were very much frustrated. You could see Arne Slot getting frustrated with his players as well, in particular the likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold. There seems to be constant conversations between him and Arne Slot, whether there's a maybe disagreement on the style of football or what they're supposed to be trying to implement. I don't know. But the way that kind of structurally Nottingham Forest applied themselves, they were in solid banks. They applied the pressure when they needed to, but they still stuck to that structure. With the players that they've got, as you alluded to, they've got willing runners as well in Alanga, in Hudson-Odoi, and I think that is the point, that both of those players have got quality. Hudson-Odoi was hyped up at Chelsea for whatever reason. It never came to fruition. He was sold on, and his kind of career's kind of meandered, I suppose, into this pathway where he's now starting to perform a lot more regularly for Nottingham Forest. Now, there's an argument to say at one point he was probably being talked up going to a Borussia Dortmund or someone like that, for example.
Bayern Munich were after him quite heavily. They were willing to put a lot of money on him.
Exactly. And Alanga's another one that came out of that Man United system. You're thinking he's a bright spark, but then he got a random loan spell to Spain, and you're thinking, where is he going? And I remember I was quoted on this podcast last season saying, I'm not too sure if that's a really good signing for Nottingham Forest, but he's actually proved me wrong. His performances, he's been quite dynamic in the approach and very much a focal point for the survival as well. But I think it was a team performance. That's the thing. And what I did kind of point out here was Ola Aina, who is in that right back performance. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. We know him from his Torino days, but also Fulham as well. He was brilliant. And I think we both put him down. Murillo had a fantastic performance. Again, very similar, I suppose, to that Arsenal kind of philosophy where they gobbled up the ball. They took on everything alongside Milinkovic. Again, what a phenomenal signing he's been for them. And I think people have been sleeping on him because they didn't know necessarily if he had the ability to step up to this kind of league. But again, he's proved it with his performances in the last few games. And full of credit to Nottingham Forest because of the way they kind of structured and went about their business. I suppose question marks about how clinical are Liverpool. Did they get lucky against Man United because of the way Man United set themselves up? And
that's a lot about Man United. I'll be honest.
It does more than anything.
A lot about Man United. That as I watched it, I was like, oh God, Forest might be better than United. But I'm glad you brought up Murillo and Milenkovic because I think we talked about Saliba and Gabriel. You got the sleek, silky midfielder, good with the ball, and then you got the guy that's just like physical, massive, wins headers. And I feel like Forest have got that balance perfect. Like Murillo, I really like as a defender. I think Forest fans won't thank me, but other teams will be coming for him before long because he's genuinely a very, very good footballer. So I like that partnership a lot. And I think that is a basis you feel like, and they finally kind of settled that goalkeeper conundrum that they've kind of struggled with a lot over the last couple of years. And you feel like, okay, maybe there's a unit there that you can start pushing on. Even a player like Alex Moreno, like I'm surprised Villa let him go. I know he's getting on a little bit, but he got a few assists for Villa. He came up with some goals. He was always very promising or very kind of useful as a player. Yeah. So I think you're looking at that unit and you're going, okay, now you can start building a little bit. And I think, I tell you what, Nuno, I did not see this coming, honestly. No. I thought he would be first sacked, and I think it might be Ange. But we will see. Fantastic for Nuno, fantastic for Forest. Just great performances all around, and being able to bring off Alanga and Hudson-Odoi off the benches, that is serious depth. That's the last thing Trent and Robertson want to see in the 60th minute. It's just like Christ, sheer pace running at me now. Yeah. The Forest, congratulations. For Liverpool, despite the fact that they weren't clinical, and they definitely weren't, I didn't feel like after the game, I wasn't like, I can't believe they didn't win that. I was just like, oh, they didn't win. They just didn't really, kind of like Spurs, I suppose. They just didn't really offer enough. There wasn't enough of that drive going forward. And I think as much as we were giving credit to Gravenberch against Manchester United, and again, this probably says more about Manchester United's midfield than it does about Liverpool's, I feel like in this game, he struggled a bit. and you saw that he's not actually a number 6, and they do still need that. And I think we're going to kind of get that with Liverpool. There's some games are going to be exposed, some games they're not, because they haven't filled that hole properly. But yeah, I didn't really, just a bad day at the office for them. Bad day at the office for them. It just happens to be that, it's ended their unbeaten run. It's the first goal they've conceded. But look, dust yourself off, stand up, and go for the next one. I'm sure they'll be fine. But absolutely massive win for Forest. Delighted for them. And the last game we're going to talk about, I suppose, is let's talk about which one do you fancy, Adam? I will edit.
Should we go Man City?
Man City 2, Brentford 1. A goal from the Barclays men era for Brentford. One of the scrappiest, nobody knows what happened, goals from a corner there. And then Haaland gets 2, and they spend the rest of the game trying to ensure that Haaland gets a hat-trick. Was this as close as it seemed, or did City just they were pretty comfortable, weren't they? Brentford were never really going to get past it.
Yeah. I think Brentford had a game plan, and they did frustrate City. I think the problem you had was, unfortunately, when you've got a player like Edison in as a goalkeeper who's able to play it out as well as he can, for example, and you saw with a lot of his passes, he was frustrated by the lack of options around him. So he had to play it more directly to Haaland, but because he's that good on the ball, he's able to get into a position where Haaland can then do 1-2 touches and then run off himself. So it created that kind of possession for Man City in that respect. Because Brentford, actually, they set up really well. They did, they limited the options that Man City do in terms of their approach. And I think that was something that Pep even alluded to. He gave credit to Brentford for the approach. And even Thomas Frank said, there's nothing more they could have done. Unfortunately, they just didn't have the ability to compete against someone like a Haaland. And yeah, inevitably, there was doubts about Haaland, whether he would be even playing in this match. But the fact that he could dust himself down for whatever the personal tragedy that they've been suffering from, and put in that kind of performance where it didn't seem to even put him off his game. He didn't seem to affect him in terms of his position. I mean, that goal in particular where he gets the better of Ethan Pinnock by just doing the simple bump, which was very similar to Gabriel and Romero. Yeah. I mean, that just really typifies how good this Man City team is, because they can mix it up. They don't have to always play the tiki-taka style that people allude to, is that they can play it direct and they can be a brute of a force with Haaland doing his natural game as well, because he can mix it up. So I think credit to Man City, credit to Brentford. The one bit of bad news from a Brentford perspective is Jon Wissa, who did score the initial one. He's now out for at least a month. So bad news for Brentford, because given that they were reliant on him and Mbeumo for the goals, yes, I think it's going to get very squeaky bum time for Brentford going forward, and a lot of reliance on Mbeumo going forward to create and score a lot of those goals. But yeah, Man City, unfortunately, this gives them the pedestal ahead of these next 2 games, because like you say, we've got a tight game midweek in the Champions League, and then they've got your very own Arsenal, Rory, to take on. So let's see what happens.
I'm really not looking forward to going up against this iteration of Haaland. Last season, he was kind of quiet for him, and I feel like we did okay. But I just have to keep telling myself, if there's 2 centre-backs that can stop him, it's Gabriel or Saliba. So I think... But I'm really not looking forward to going up against this iteration of Erling, because he looks terrifying. So, guys, we are going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we are going to look at all the European football. Adam, we've been trying to avoid it. We've been avoiding it so long. But
because we don't understand it. That's why.
We're going to have to tackle head-on the European dilemma and how the hell this competition works. Guys, we will see you on the other side. I didn't do a review of the fixtures. I'm going to quickly do a review of the fixtures that I can edit in, and then we'll go through the thing, right? Wait, that's the first round of fixtures, for fuck's sake. Elsewhere, Manchester United put Southampton in even more misery with a 3-0 win there. Missed penalty definitely left the door open for a Manchester United comeback. Onana with a great double save, kind of. But United won't care. Rashford's first goal, 3 points on the board. Fulham drew 1-1 with West Ham. A late Danny Ings goal for West Ham.
People
getting the headline. Forgot he was there. A delicious assist for Emil Smith-Rowe. For the first goal.
Raul
Absolutely loving life in West London, that lad. Leicester City were 2-0 up, but got pegged back 2-2 by Crystal Palace. Eagles. Incredible result for them. It's really not looking, it wasn't looking good for Glasner, but I think getting that comeback, getting that point is massive for them. Brighton and Ipswich drew 0-0. Chelsea beat Bournemouth 1-0. Sancho with an assist on his debut. 14 cards in the first half, or 14 cards across this game. It was a new record for the Premier League. And the last game was Wolves 1, Newcastle 2. A little bit concerning for Newcastle, for Wolves even. Harvey Barnes is a very, very good footballer. Guys, we are going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to look at all of the European football. We are back, and it's time for the brand spanking new, definitely not a cynical money spinning format of the Champions League. Let's try and figure it out. Guys, we're just going to take you through the fixtures involving all of the English teams, and you're going to have to do the rest of it. So, starting on tonight, as you are listening, we have Young Boys taking on Aston Villa in Switzerland. And then in two of the games that are repeats of Champions League finals, the first we have Milan taking on Liverpool. Adam, my fine city is going to be full of Scousers. How am I going to deal with it? Milan, Liverpool, how do you see this game going? Fonseca with a huge win at the weekend. Arne Slot with a huge loss at the weekend. Can Milan continue this form and upset them?
It's certainly going to be an open match. I think it'd be fascinating to see how Arne Slot approaches it in the European competition as well. I think there's a lot of unknowns with both of these sides in terms of what they're going to offer. I think it's definitely going to be one as a neutral to watch out for, because I think there will be goals in this one, given the form of Milan as well as Liverpool. Certainly, I think Liverpool will probably slightly edge it in terms of the kind of initial kind of attacks that they've got and the personnel that they can lead those attacks in particular. But look, Liverpool have to be wary of the likes of Rafael Leao as well as Theo Hernandez from that left-hand side perspective. And then we've also got the likes of maybe a Tammy Abraham or Alvaro Morata, who may lead the line and cause a bit of mischief. Also, Christian Pulisic has been good in terms of what his contributions have been for Milan. Milan can't really afford any injuries in this match either, Rory. So it's going to be a good test in that kind of midfield to see who can outdo the other. But certainly I think it's going to be a very open, expansive style kind of game. I think there'll be goals, but I think Liverpool will slightly edge this one, Rory.
I like that Trent against Leao battle could be quite fun to watch. Like, could be interesting. Like the Trent having to deal with him and Teo down the same wing. He's going to need a lot of help from Diaz or whoever's on his side to double up there, because that could be fun. But yeah, I think this will be a really good game. So much history in this game is always kind of entertaining, right?
Yeah.
The next one, another repeat of a Champions League final. We have Manchester City hosting the mighty Nerazzurri. Inter, of course, dropping points at the weekend, disappointingly against Monza. City, as we've covered, getting a comfortable win against Brentford. City winning everything, all their games, straight 3 points. Do they get another 3 points here, Adam?
Not necessarily. I think this could be a very tight game. I think, look, there's a sense that Inter Milan will want to get revenge for that final in some respects. But I think also Inzaghi appreciates that this is going to be a good tactical match between him and Pep. You know, I think they've got some balanced players in their teams, you know, that can outdo the other. I think it'll be a fascinating kind of matchup. And I think actually it will be a very good game. It might not be lots of goals in this though, Rory, but I think it certainly will be a fascinating matchup. I think it'll be very close. I'm gutted that I won't be able to watch this live, because I think that's where it would be fascinating to watch personally. But yeah, I think this is going to be a very good game in itself. I would not be surprised if this ends as a draw personally. What about you? Where do you kind of see this game planning out, and who do you think will get the better of the other?
I think tactically it'll be fascinating because they're two of the best or two of the most interesting coaches in Europe at the moment. I think, as we saw with the final, even though it was a while ago now, it's very, very close, a lot closer than people thought. Inter have kind of been blowing a little bit hot and cold this season. Like they've been like either really, really good or just not quite on it. So they're going to have to be massively on it here. I do unfortunately just see City getting a win because it's Man City, but I think Inter definitely at least get a goal. And push them. I think it'll be really, really close. I think that will be an interesting one. That one's on Wednesday night. That one's definitely worth watching. And then the final English team in the Champions League is my very own Arsenal heading to Bergamo. As I said earlier, really intrigued to see what the starting lineup is going to be. But all I care about is getting 3 points, bringing them back to London, and then thinking about the weekend. Guys, let's head to the Europa League super quickly. In the Europa League, we have Manchester United hosting Dutch opposition as they take on Twente. That is on Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, the same time as Milan-Liverpool. I think I know which one I'm going to be watching. And then we have the other English team, Tottenham taking on Qarabag on Thursday night at 9 o'clock, same time as Arsenal. Think I know which game I'm going to be watching. And that is all of the European action. No Conference League. We definitely knew that before the record. So, guys, we're going to take another very quick break, and we're going to come back with the Premier League fixtures this weekend.
And we are back. And Rory, I'm going to take the listener and viewers through the fixtures that are going to take place over the weekend. So we'll start off at Saturday's fixtures, and in particular 12:30 p.m. kickoff time, as we see West Ham hosting Chelsea. What a game that could potentially be. As that's a bit of a spicy game, as you allude to. But we then move into the 3 p.m. kickoff times, and we've also got another spicy one. Aston Villa hosting Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolverhampton Wanderers needing the points, but this is somewhat of a derby as well. Then we move into Fulham at home to Newcastle United, Leicester City at home to Everton, Liverpool at home to Bournemouth, and Southampton at home to Ipswich Town, before we also see Spurs at home to Brentford, Rory. But we move into the 5:30 p.m. kickoff time, and that is Crystal Palace at home to Man United. Could they pull off another shock like they did last season? I'm personally hoping so, Rory. Anyway, we move into Sunday, and we'll start off at 2 p.m. where Brighton and Hove Albion host Nottingham Forest before the big game this weekend, and that's at 4:30 p.m. kickoff time in the Manchester City Stadium, and that is Manchester City at home to Arsenal. Rory, are you bricking it yet?
I just want to get this week out of the way and I can move on with my life. I feel like this whole time, right, Tottenham, done. Next one. Like, if we get a draw, I'll take it now. Deal. Yeah. Go back to London, and we've got our two hardest games of the season out of the way. Cool. Done. On to the next one.
Yeah. Oh, well. Well, Rory, that is your fixtures for this weekend. More importantly, listener, make sure you tune in to our Serie A edition, where me, Rory, and our guest Andrea talk all things Serie A. But yeah, Rory, any further thoughts before we move on and let the listener and watchers do their thing?
No, guys, we're going to let you go home. As always, thank you for following us. Thank you for subscribing on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed yet, go and do it now. There you go. Thank you. Yeah. Good. You can find us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod, on Instagram and TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. If you're listening to us on the podcast, go to your podcast app of choice, leave us a rating, leave us a review, leave a comment, do whatever you want. Just give us some feedback, please. Give us some feedback. Good. We will see you next week, guys. Once Arsenal are victorious at the Etihad and in Bergamo, and my smile is even bigger and I'm even more unbearably smug. I bet you can't wait. We will see you next week, guys. Bye. See you next time.